Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears, the antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers, the snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever managed to stay on top of the food chain. Animal super senses. You won't believe what's possible. This is Animal Super Senses, the show that grants you the vision and sound, the scents and smells, tastes and touches of the animal realm. Those are the senses we share with most animals, but what about those senses that no human is equipped with? Some animals seem to have superhuman senses, powers that can detect magnetic fields, electrical fields, and infrared radiation. Yes, there's a whole spectrum of information out there that just passes us ordinary humans by. We need special technology to register and measure them, whereas some animals come with their own biological equipment just for that purpose. Welcome to the arena of superhuman animal super senses. We begin our journey with some animals that are truly magnetic. Tiny quantities of magnetite have been found in many animals with a superior sense of direction. But let's begin with a bit of a flutter, courtesy of the monarch butterfly. Small but perfectly formed, it is found in various habitats around the world, as far apart as New Guinea and Bermuda, New Zealand, and Mexico. Those found in the eastern US and southeast Canada spend the summer months there before flying south for winter to a single mountainous spot in central Mexico. It's a journey that can see them fly up to 5,000 kilometers. The second and third generation monarch butterflies return in the spring. But how do they know their way home, or indeed find their way south in the first place? By using their internal compass, literally. It used to be thought monarch butterflies navigated by the position of the sun. But that didn't explain how they continued in the right direction even on heavily overcast days. Not only that, but to adjust for changes in location when they are literally blown off course. The butterflies must be able to set and reset their internal compass based on their current location. Biologists have found monarch butterflies have magnetic molecules in their brains sensitive to the Earth's magnetic field. So really, just like a compass. They use these in combination with the sun's position to make their epic journeys. Any way you look at it, long-distance animal migrations are one of the great wonders of the natural world. And nowhere more so than the marine environment, where migratory patterns can reach amazing magnitude. How these creatures find their way there and back, navigating vast distances with such precision, was for a long time a mystery. A riddle of sensory and behavioral biology. Sea turtles, like the loggerhead turtle here, are among the most extraordinary navigators of the fathomless deep.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
As hatchlings, baby turtles which have never before been in the ocean are able to somehow set an unfailing course towards the open sea and then maintain their heading long after swimming beyond the visible shoreline. Little baby hatchling loggerhead sea turtles first swim from the Florida coast eastward to the North Atlantic. Then, gradually over the course of several years, following complicated migratory paths over huge expanses of seemingly featureless ocean, then return again to the North American shores. Now, the most difficult part of open sea navigation is determining longitude or east or west position. It took human navigators centuries of long-distance voyages to figure out how to do that. But luckily, loggerhead turtles pick up on magnetic signals in order to determine their position, both east-west and north-south. As adults, they retain these phenomenal navigational skills, which guide them as they migrate between specific feeding areas and nesting beaches. Other long-distance migrators thought to possess magnetic superpower sense include both humpback and sperm whales. Sperm whales, of course, are easy to recognize due to their enormous heads with prominent foreheads. They have the largest brain of any creature on Earth. They dive over 3,000 feet in search of food and consume about 3% of their body weight per day. When they dive for their dinner, they can hold their breaths for up to 90 minutes. Female sperm whales and calves remain in tropical or subtropical waters the whole year round and apparently practice communal childcare. Males become sexually mature at 18 years, at which point they migrate to higher latitudes, where the water is colder and the pickings are richer. Traveling alone or in groups, they cruise the oceans at over 30 kilometers per hour. Later, they head back towards the equator to breed. These journeys would seem to require a pretty foolproof internal compass. Humpback whales, meanwhile, are found in all the world's oceans. In the southern hemisphere, humpback whales will migrate from Antarctica to the subtropical coastal waters of Western and Eastern Australia and Fiji, where they mate and give birth during the winter and spring. Northern humpback whales, on the other hand, find their way from Alaska to Hawaii, swimming in a straight line. We're talking journeys that are thousands of kilometers long. How do they do it? One theory is they have a unique guidance system, utilizing a combination of solar and magnetic navigation. This hypothesis comes in part from mass strandings of whales, thought to be affected by solar activity causing disturbances to the Earth's magnetic field, and the fact that small quantities of magnetite have been found in the brains of humpback whales. Another ocean leviathan, the shark, finds its way around thanks to the power of electroreception. In fact, every type of shark breed has electrical sensors in their nose and heads, named after a 17th century man of science called Stefano Lorenzini. The ampullae of Lorenzini are actually special electroreceptor organs. Though named almost 350 years ago, it was only in the 1960s where Dutch scientists were able to identify the main function of Lorenzini's ampullae, electroreceptivity. In the last 15 years, it's been concluded that sharks can also perceive temperature deviations using the electrosensory system. When a fish swims through the water, it generates an electric field which is detected by the sharks. These sensors wouldn't work anywhere near as well in the open air, but salt water is an excellent conductor of electricity. Even a stingray hidden beneath the sand is not safe from the sensors of a hammerhead shark. So, while its name might suggest anything but refinement, the hammerhead shark, as seen here, does have a very refined sense of electroreception. That's thanks to the size and shape of their broad, flat heads, meaning the ampullae are spread over a greater surface area, so sensing out prey is made that much easier. And now to an animal that's an exception to the rule, and just about every other rule. The platypus, known too as the duck-billed platypus, is a semi-aquatic, egg-laying mammal found only in eastern Australia and Tasmania. The first scientists to examine a specimen believed they were victims of some elaborate taxidermy hoax. Well, the platypus is definitely a one-off. It has a duck bill and webbed feet, a beaver tail, and the body shape and fur of an otter. Male platypuses are also venomous, with sharp stingers on the heels of their rear feet that will knock out just about anything with a pulse. These Australian mammals are bottom feeders that will hunt underwater. In spite of their mishmash of physique, they make surprisingly graceful swimmers. They paddle with their front webbed feet and steer with their hind legs and that beaver-like tail. When they submerge, folds of skin cover their eyes and ears and stop water from entering, and their nostrils are sealed shut. The platypus can remain underwater for a minute or two at a time, using its sensitive duck bill to find food. Shellfish, worms, larvae, and insects make up the bulk of the platypus's diet. Along with bits of mud and gravel, all these consumables are stored in pouches in the platypus's cheeks. When they come to the surface, they mash everything up and eat it, using the bits of gravel to help them chew their food. Well, after all, it's not like they have teeth. But if their eyes and nostrils are closed underwater, then how do they manage to sense potential food when it's around? The answer can be found on its duck-like bill. Each and every platypus bill contains around 40,000 electroreceptors arranged in rows. Electrical impulses alert the platypus to objects underwater. Electrical currents travel through water better than air, and the platypus's side-to-side swimming style surely helps conductivity too. Let's head back to dry land, to the forests and woodlands of either Papua New Guinea or Australia. That's where you'll find this spiky fellow, the echidna, a short-beaked echidna in this case. Sometimes known as spiny anteaters, the echidna is, like the platypus, an egg-laying mammal. If you live in Australia, you have seen its likeness on the 5-cent coin. But unlike the platypus, the spiny anteater spends all its time on dry land, giving it the distinction of being the world's only terrestrial egg-laying mammal. The echidna is also the only land-born mammal we know to possess the supersense of electroreception. Put simply, hundreds of receptors concentrated in the tip of the snout allow it to pick up on natural electrical stimuli. This is particularly useful when it comes to hunting for buried prey. The short-beaked echidna, as seen here, uses those electroreceptors to pick up on the movements of ants and termites. Concealed as they may be to the naked eye, but the humidity in their nests, particularly after the rain, is a dead giveaway. And now, from curious egg-laying animals to a creature that most of us would probably pass by without a second thought, given the opportunity. We speak now of the dung beetle. Not the most glamorous of creations, this humble insect is actually remarkable in several ways. Okay, let's deal with their diet first. Just as their name suggests, dung beetles are beetles that feed exclusively, or for the main part anyway, on dung and feces. Industriously laboring away on the lower end of the food chain, they possess exceptional talent as dung disposal units. Why a single dung beetle can bury dung that is 250 times its own body weight in the course of one night. Because this critter does a lot more than just live up to its name. It calls to mind something the writer and wit Oscar Wilde once said, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Well, as it turns out, the dung beetle is looking at the stars. Dung beetles have compound eyes that are built for low light. While most insects would only be able to see a few of the brightest stars in the sky, the Milky Way's distinctive streak of light is a useful navigation cue. It has been deduced already that dung beetles use polarized moonlight to walk backwards in a straight line. But figuring out how they orient themselves on moonless nights has just been discovered. Scientists tested the idea that dung beetles exploit the starry sky for orientation. They created special little hats made from black cardboard, which were taped to the heads of dung beetles. The hats block the beetle's view of the night sky and confirm the scientists' hunch that these insects navigate by using the Milky Way's map of the stars. The theory was confirmed in a planetarium where a projection of the Milky Way was turned on and off. The dung beetle is now in the sensory spotlight. The humble poo gatherer presents the first documented use of the Milky Way for orientation in the animal kingdom. A sunset is a thing of beauty, but it's more than that for songbirds. Recent research in two songbird species, Swainson's thrushes and gray-cheeked thrushes, has demonstrated that. Scientists are positive these birds can detect Earth's magnetic field even if they're not quite sure how. While it's well documented that animals such as sea turtles rely on internal stores of mineral magnetite, which act like tiny magnetic needles in the animal's cells, how birds do it is still a mystery. Receptors in their eyes, or do they do it with their sense of smell? The jury, so to speak, is still out. Whatever the case, even though these birds are well equipped to detect Earth's magnetic field, they also need to calibrate their internal compass from time to time, on a daily basis, in fact. Relying solely on Earth's magnetic field could have the effect of blowing the songbirds off course as the field shifts direction in their North American breeding grounds. Enter the sun, which always sets in the west. It's nice to know that even for animals with superhuman senses, sometimes the eternal verities stay true. On Animal Supersenses, the stars are the senses. And in this episode, they've taken us from the ocean's depths to the skies above, from life teeming beneath our feet to one of the largest creatures on Earth. We have been on a journey of senses, superhuman animal senses. But the trip is far from over. These incredible powers of perception will live to fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Supersenses.
Anyone fascinated by the natural world has probably wondered why some animals have such strange-looking sense organs. The elephant with its huge ears. The antennae of a butterfly, which up close look like feathers. The snake with its split tongue. And what about less obvious enhancements, like the sensory cells on a crocodile's skin? Surely these evolutionary traits aren't just for decoration. In fact, the size, shape, and location of these animal sense organs is all for a purpose. And just like us, animals rely on their senses to communicate with each other, find their way around, stay safe, and most importantly, to find food. When you see how superior some animal senses are compared to those of humans, you might wonder how we ever manage to stay on top of the food chain. Animal supersenses. You won't believe what's possible.
Welcome to the show that puts you in the eyes and ears, the taste buds and nerve endings of wild animals. There's a whole world and more than one spectrum of sensations that animals are aware of which just pass humans by. And yet, while it's widely known that, for example, a dog's sense of smell is dozens of times more acute than humans, or that goats have close to a 360-degree field of vision, there is a kind of sixth sense that some animals have which still defies explanation. Call it extrasensory perception, animal abilities we can't entirely explain, but which leave us wondering and in awe. For example, take the animal response to disaster, such as the tsunami. Tragically, the tidal wave killed over 200,000 people, but the animal population was comparatively unscathed. Observers even recollect animals leaving hours before the disaster. How did they know? Can animals' extrasensory powers predict natural disasters? Do animals have a kind of extrasensory perception or sixth sense that alerts them to danger? Well, the answer is we still really don't know, but it's fascinating to speculate. And that's mostly what we'll be doing in this episode of Animal Super Senses, asking questions. The tsunami of 2004. In the hours before the tsunami hit, there are reports that at elephant camps, the large mammals were becoming agitated. They trumpeted loudly, what may have been elephantine distress calls. Many even managed to break free from their camps, presumably to head for higher ground. Just hours later, disaster. In retrospect, it seems entirely possible the elephants were responding to low-frequency rumbles that are produced when storms approach and atmospheric weather changes occur. These rumbles happen in a spectrum of sound called infrasound that is below our level of hearing, but it is one which elephants use all the time to communicate over long distances, to listen in for approaching storms, and so on. Infrasound can travel vast distances through ground, air, and water. It can be generated by wind and thunder, volcanoes, earthquakes, and huge movements of water. Scientists think that elephants feel these vibrations through their trunks or even their feet. So the next time you see an elephant with its trunk to the ground, just think it may not be sniffing the terrain, but making a trunk call. What that means, not just listening out for sound, but picking up vibrations through its trunk, which has been found contains a pressure-sensitive nerve capable of detecting seismic signals. Meanwhile, you might think, wouldn't it be great if humans had the ability to use infrasound to detect natural phenomena like hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic activity, and tsunamis? Infrasound, low-frequency sounds, are produced by a variety of geophysical processes, but also some of the more dramatic man-made sources, aircraft and explosions, for example. In the United States, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, are currently developing highly sophisticated instruments to detect and monitor these kinds of extreme events. Naturally, those kinds of instruments all cost a small fortune to do what elephants do naturally, without even making that big of a deal about it. The production and perception of infrasound has been observed in multiple mammals, including whale, giraffe, hippo, and rhino. We can assume that some animals are influenced by environmental changes that can occur before a natural calamity. However, our understanding of such possible precursor effects and how organisms react to them is still very limited. As long as this limitation exists, the unusual behavior of animals alone cannot be used to evaluate an increased risk of earthquake or the arrival of a tsunami. But there seem to be other cues which animals tune into, far beyond the reach of the normal sensory package. If it's something in the air, then we're probably going to be way down on the species list before we sense it. When it comes to noticing shifts in barometric pressure, the sort of changes caused by a hurricane at sea, for instance, it seems birds leave us for dust. Seagulls in particular seem to know when to seek shelter from the storm. They instinctively head inland, away from the coastline, prior to the onset of inclement weather. It is believed they sense changes in the air pressure and know just when it's time to hightail it out of there. Some birds just seem to have an internal barometer about these things, literally. Migratory birds, for example, like these white-throated sparrows. These fine feathered fellas breed in Canada and New England, but when the winter comes to call, they migrate to warmer spots in the southern and eastern United States. Their inbuilt barometer, for thus it seems to be, allows them to detect changes in air pressure. Some birds' abilities to detect an approaching storm can determine exactly when a large flock leaves for a long flight. Not only can they select the best departure time, but also the best altitude for long-distance travel. It's yet another instance where mankind has to invent and design all kinds of sensitive and expensive equipment just to match what comes naturally in the wild. Some avian species act more like weather forecasters than others do. When humans lived closer to nature, several observations were made about birds and the weather. Not all of them strictly scientific, but seeming to contain more than a seed of truth. Birds flying high in the sky are meant to be a sign of fine weather approaching. If they fly low, however, or don't fly at all, then it's believed a storm is on its way. But then on the one hand, some say birds become noisier as bad weather approaches, while on the other, there are those who will swear birds become abnormally quiet before a storm. Large groups of birds perching on power lines is said to be an indication of stormy weather. Another widely held belief is that if birds feed during the rain, it means the rain will last a long time. If they don't come out to feed, then the rain will end soon. The sixth sense for barometric pressure certainly hasn't been distributed evenly through the species. We travel now, with a certain amount of trepidation, to the shallow waters, coral reefs, and coastlines. That is the natural habitat of this sleek and deadly character. It is the blacktip shark, and it too has a similar uncanny ability to feel things, but it is not so much in the air as in the water. We all know that tropical storms develop as low-pressure systems offshore. how do sharks respond to the pressure of an approaching tropical storm? There are some interesting facts that might surprise you. In 2001, Tropical Storm Gabrielle made landfall in central Florida. Researchers had been tracking the movements of a population of juvenile blacktip sharks in a small bay there for about 3 years. Blacktip sharks were typically resident in this bay for 6 to 8 months during the summer before swimming south for the winter. The research corroborated that the blacktips typically did not leave the area until migration time, and definitely not in large groups. As Tropical Storm Gabrielle approached the coast, the researchers simply didn't have enough time to remove their array of acoustic receivers, their listening stations, from the water. They simply left them behind and hoped for the best. Fortunately, the equipment was still intact after the storm, and when researchers downloaded the data a little while later, they discovered something amazing. Not only had all the blacktip sharks they had been tracking left, but as it turned out, they had all split the scene some 7 hours before Hurricane Gabrielle hit the coast. The almost inescapable conclusion was that the sharks responded to the decrease in barometric air pressure that precedes such a big storm and made for the open seas. When it comes to storm warnings, some of the evidence for animal foresight is anecdotal at best, and sometimes even a bit murky. The most commonly repeated of these tales is that of amphibians, namely frogs and toads, who are reputed to croak louder before rainfall. Another fascinating case study is the tree frog, where it is most commonly kept as a household pet. Tree frog pets are most commonly kept in a big glass jar with a ladder running up to the lid. What the anecdotal evidence seems to suggest is that if the tree frog stays at the bottom of the jar, then rain is imminent. If, on the other hand, the little green chap climbs up the ladder, then the higher he goes, the better the weather will be. Meanwhile, back in the wild, green tree frogs are sometimes known as rain frogs. They are so named because their call is said to be the loudest at the onset of stormy weather. To find the most accurate weather forecasters on the planet, it's possible we need to get down on our knees with a magnifying glass and look into the dirt. Again, this observable phenomena still doesn't exactly come under the heading of scientific fact. But could it be that ants are the most reliable weather forecasters on Earth? Any definitive conclusions will have to wait until all the research is in. But keen observers have noted that when ants build steep mound sides to their nests, it seems to be an indication that rains are on their way. With the approach of inclement weather, ants have been witnessed carrying out extra industrious labor, working furiously, more furiously than usual, to either build and move into new nests or fix up and clean their existing nests. Maybe it's only spring cleaning, but they also gather food, as if preparing for a siege, the good little soldiers that they are. But how do they know without being able to utilize some type of extrasensory perception or insects' sixth sense? Even the most accurate scientific research still doesn't have a good answer for that. To observe another animal that has faculties which could indicate a sixth sense, you don't need a magnifying glass, or indeed to travel to some exotic corner of the world. In fact, you might not need to go any further than your own backyard. Long known as humans' best friend, different breeds of dogs have demonstrated their loyalty and courage throughout the centuries. They can also be trained as canine detectives, able to sniff out everything from narcotics to termites, concealed explosive devices, to people trapped under rubble. Smell is a dog's dominant sense. So much so that a huge part of its brain is devoted to analyzing odors. Dogs have two giant olfactory bulbs attached to the brain, which decode every smell they encounter. The bulbs weigh about 4 times as much as human olfactory bulbs. But the source of the dog's exceptional ability to smell is its wet snout. The moist, leathery surface of the snout acts like Velcro, catching even the tiniest molecules of smells, then dissolving them so that the dog's internal smell receptor cells can analyze them properly. To keep his nose wet, a dog must produce a constant supply of mucus through its nasal cavities. What is possibly less well known is their seeming extrasensory perception as medical detection dogs. Medical detection dogs are becoming increasingly popular among diabetics. Dogs seem to have an uncanny ability to alert their diabetic owners when their blood sugar levels are too low. Although odor clues seem to be the most plausible explanation, no one is entirely sure how these adorable friends can do this. The senses are the stars and super senses, and this episode has been no exception. We have been on a fantastic voyage, led by the extrasensory perceptions some animals have, a few of which really do defy explanation. The sixth senses have taken us from the ocean depths to the jungle, the teeming life underfoot, to the migratory patterns of birds on the wing, and the incredible sense of smell of our inseparable canine friends. And these super senses will be back to fight again another day. So join us next time on Animal Super Senses.